All right, welcome back to another episode of Cameo Podcast. It's impromptu. I threw this one on my guest. We've had a relationship, probably one of the longest I've had in Kamloops, because he did instruct me, and when I was, being able to be taught stuff. I don't like listening to people anymore. That Old Town Road, man, I just goes and repeat in my head. Ain't nobody tell me nothing. Can't tell me nothing. Anyways.
Wasn't the adage that the wise man knows that he knows nothing?
Oh, I don't know that one. But I'm going to, pretend I'm humble and take it. Thank you. So, David and I, we both have a fascination in tourism, digital media, how they intersect. We often get coffees and never record. Some of our conversations, they're lost. So for our selfish reasons, here we go. So David, what's your first memory of me? Let's just start there, and see where the conversation goes.
My first memory of Nevin would probably be the no shoes.
Oh, really? Did I actually not wear shoes?
Well, I just remember seeing you at one point without shoes, and that was the thing that reminded me of how adventure-oriented you were, because you used to always wear the jeans rolled up and then the no shoes or the sandals. And I remember that being one of the entry points to me connecting with you, being hey, there's more for you if you just learn how to manage your image a little bit, right?
But isn't it funny though, that image, though it was unkept, it's what reminds you of me, and it's pretty powerful branding at this point?
Sure, absolutely. And it was more, sometimes I have to balance this idea of authenticity and being true to yourself and playing the game of the people that have power and the systems that work around us, right? And in fact, at that point, I was likely speaking from the position of make it a little easier on yourself around here, if you know what I mean.
Oh, right? yeah. Just like Kamloops wasn't ready for...
Well, not just Kamloops, but at the university and things like that, right? Or just, and I remember even...
Because the adventure kids were segmented and often went off and did their soul seeking at the rafting resort.
Yes.
Right. Very few actually went into the actual degree, from my experience. Mm-hmm. And the ones who did were very studious. And studious in the way that they weren't there because their parents were forcing them to be there. They wanted to be there, and they were there to learn.
Yes, and most of them had some sort of vein of topic that they were really interested in, whether it's adventure therapy or adventure photography or leadership or something like that, right? So, yeah, I think it was an interesting sort of introduction to you. But I think even manifestly, a few years later, I remember seeing you getting your first sales job and you pointing out that you were wearing businessman shoes. So
yeah,
I think that's kind of a...
you build on the meme, right? If you have that already ingrained in someone's head, you want to just bump it up again. Because in my head, the way it works is it's like a forum, like an old school forum, right? You go through the archives, you find something relevant, and you bring it to the top.
Yeah.
And so that's what I always do. And my wife also would make fun of me because she took me to Target when I was in town and helped me pick out a blue shirt and khaki pants for one of your class presentations.
Yes.
And she has a photo.
You could earn businessman bonus points with me for khakis and a blue shirt.
Yeah.
For sure, right?
Because there's a photo of me in a Hawaiian shirt and cut off shorts and backwards hat. In the change room, my wife had to take the photo of me because the Adventure Kids were different. But I don't know. I look back, Ted Morton, and his he's a power couple. Him and Carrie Lewis, Freeze Athletics, and then Teddy has Canadian enduro racing. I think
both doing real well.
Yeah. Unbelievable growth between the two of them.
It was nothing about don't be an adventure person or adventure kid or whatever. It was more about trying to open your eyes a bit, because I was having interesting conversations with you about things that were not adventure related, and I was you could play some other roles if you wanted to, right?
Oh, I guess it's just my way of learning about things, right? In my perspective, which a lot of people don't understand how they operate or how I operate, and it's a different learning mechanism, which is why I always respected. Oh my gosh, how Rob
Hood?
Rob Hood, yeah, that's why I always respect, because I can't believe he let me do what I did for my grad sem, and how he let me, and how important my grad sem actually is to me to this day. Just because he saw I didn't and couldn't do it like the other people, he let me do it, and it was it's starkly profound. In my education, I don't remember much about my education, but I do remember like my moments with Rob.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's actually retiring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can't believe he's not retired already. That man should have been retired like a decade ago.
Well, he earned it a decade ago, but
yes.
I think he, like a lot of academics, your work becomes part of your identity, and it becomes part of your purpose.
And that's a crazy story too. Is like he wasn't into his 30s or 40s until he started into academia. He was a late bloomer.
Yeah, totally.
Like he already had a career.
Yeah.
Like I remember that story. I should reach out to him and get that story from him.
If you look at him, Billy, and I all have kind of late bloomer components to our careers, right? Like,
and that's totally difficult for people in this world. Like, people just don't have patience anymore. Like, I'm totally impatient at some things, but super patient in others.
Yeah.
And it's crazy seeing like how people judge each other, and they're realizing they're not in the same race at all because they're not even like it just like if you want to use the running analogy, right? Like you're at a 2K, I'm running an ultra marathon, right? Like like it's crazy.
Yeah, well, and I think it's an interesting time as well because of course there's all the sort of stats of like you'll have 8 careers if you're a young person now and things like that. Yeah, or like just I don't even know what the number is right now.
Yeah,
but it's always
I
you'll have 4 or 5. Certainly the idea of the mono career, like where you'll work at one place and do one thing for your life, that's kind of gone.
Totally.
Right?
I just saw
Almost
this
extinct, right?
This prominent battle rapper who retired from battle rap is a British citizen, was supposed to try and become Canadian citizen to join the army, but now he's looking for a trade. Right?
Oh,
It's just like, okay, that's quite the the flip there.
Well, that's true, and I think that happens with a lot of musicians, right? Like I have a bunch of friends who are metal heads and metal bands and that kind of thing, and it's really interesting because like even like I was talking to one of them the other day who's become a postman now, like he's like works for Canada Post or whatever, but he was basically talking about how like these other guys from other bands are like coming to him and being like, "Can you help me become a postman because I need something."
They need that union job.
Well, I need a union job. I've gotten to my like mid 30s or late 30s, and I'm like,
imagine being a punk guy being like, "Let's join the union."
Oh, I know. Well, well, and if you look at the origins, like unions were super punk rock, and I think that like, we're in an era now where we've often seemed like we forget a bunch of the origins of things that mattered to us, and that got like unions
played an important part in the industrialization of the Western world, so that we have a higher standard of living.
Yeah, and a critical component in our sort of quality of life, right? Like they invented the weekend and all these other things that we now treasure, right? Like so, I think their weakening is a sign of the weakening of
well, the thing with unions though
is
unions also inject human biases. Which would be very interesting when blockchain and AI take over unions, right? Like we want to talk like fucking the leveling a playing field, like blockchain. Oh man, I want to write a paper about its connections to communism and how happiness is replacing money and how blockchain can do all that shit. Like that's going to be an interesting fucking paper.
It should. I mean, it will be interesting, but I think that the most intelligent opinions I've heard on AI and the related stuff recently have been that. It won't be that AI will be able to outsmart us, or maybe it will be. I mean, obviously the Skynet scenario is
quantum
is possible.
is quantum.
Yeah, but that really the true advantage of AI will be super smart humans using AI or interacting with AI or like being part of the decision points of AI. That it will allow us to sort of make that because we're basically like it's super hard to program nuance or empathy or things that really do matter.
Oh man,
right? But I think that the sort of we as humans also tend to like want to just make silver bullets, right? Like that's what we want, right?
We're not even at the level where we are talking about like that real self-awareness of like who you are and how that like we're as a human race we're still so stuck on taxes and money and like who's at the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck, AI and blockchain is going to decimate all that and rework it.
Or I think it's going to amplify the bad parts, right? Like how we talk about social media sometimes about how it like...
It depends on who creates the technology and how...
Yes, right?
And the vulnerabilities of blockchain, because we can't comprehend blockchain entirely yet.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Like, so many people are like crypto heads, and like, you know, they were laughing at me that I didn't put money into crypto, and I was like, well, I'd be laughing at you because I learned about Bitcoin long before you, and I had $113 in my bank, and I was starving and eating Red River all the time. So like, you know, don't tell me about something I already know. I even decided not to get into it, and then look at them now, right? Like, so many of them have lost money, and they were so like, oh yeah, I understand this. This is easy. It's not, right?
Well, and it's also like, you have to think of like the sort of power structures of things, because like, yes, the idea of cryptocurrency is good, and hopefully the idea of creating a new currency is part of that.
The education market was monetized from the beginning.
Sure, I mean,
right?
well, all these things are somewhat, well, that's part of the idea, monetization. But like, do you really think the big banks are going to let you have a currency that they aren't in on?
But
like,
you have to
like
understand,
they'll use regulation and standards to run you out of the system.
Absolutely,
essentially, right?
But
like,
but the hierarchy blossomed overnight. That was immediately monetized in a community that was all about anonymity, right? And you talk about deep fakes and creating like cartoon characters and animating them stuff, right? That's how like some of these massive companies just rose to power, because all of a sudden there was a whole media industry because people are trying to understand and educate themselves, right? And all you can trust are white papers, which are just literally sales manifestos of like why you should
content, right?
Or content, right?
Capital C content,
like
right?
Like capital C. I want to put a money symbol in there somehow, but I can't. It just doesn't work. But you know what I mean? Like it's crazy how it's blossomed, right? And you're totally right. The regulation of it all, it's either going to decimate it or prop it up, and people are also fighting against globalization. And it's like, what are you doing over here, guys?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm sort of fascinated a little bit right now about this idea of regulation, and like, how will these big tech companies use it against competition? And like, you know, and there's a lot of talk of this about like, especially like, you know, Facebook and Google are their biggest line items or fastest growing line items right now are lobbyists and policymakers to basically look at how can they create regulations that would allow them to maintain their positions, or that would allow them to be the only ones who could meet some sort of onerous standard. That so you wouldn't be able to just sort of be like, well, Nevin and I started a new social media, but we can't afford to meet this new standard that they've created for global social media networks.
Which is why like it's kind of scary that we're still using like the dated laws. They do need to get updated for like a modern world. Right, like
look at our lawmakers. Like I think that
it's such a Wild West. Like I found an MP who has less than 300 followers on Instagram, but he's verified. He's verified on Instagram. Like fuck that, man. I want that star.
Can't you like contact Instagram and get them to verify you?
But like
if
how
you have like if you send them a letterhead of.
I don't like,
right?
it, that's a whole shady. There's not really a lot of information, but there's also like scammers who are like building an industry off of the fake verification of it, right? And also like, why should you care about the blue star, right? All you're paying for is for someone when they DM you or you DM them, it just gets highlighted. It's just a highlighter. It's like LinkedIn Premium. You you see someone do LinkedIn Premium to you, you for sure open that DM, right? Like. And you know, LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft, right? And they're doing an amazing job. And they're getting hard into live streaming now and notifying. Like if I want to really take off, fuck man, I could make LinkedIn content for days and then
I think
decimate
LinkedIn's
people.
Got a lot of the most potential, and I had an interesting conversation with a couple of digital marketing people from Tourism Kamloops about how like they don't use it that much, but how it's actually one of the faster growing networks, and that there's a couple of sort of things. Of course, it's business to business, it's super useful for that, but there's also this like authentication factor where like there aren't really any fake LinkedIn accounts. There's a few of them, right?
There's a lot of there's a lot of podcasters from Fiverr, and they're very easy to point out. You know who they are.
But it's also easy to verify. Like this person's face is right there. Like
I'm not staking my career on your relationship. And some of the stuff I accept because I want to keep it. I want to know how many like LinkedIn followers you can have. It's actually one of my oldest social media accounts, and a lot of people can't believe it. It's because like, no, I had to destroy my Facebook in third year university and start fresh. I lost a lot of content, but I also saved myself in a lot of ways. You know.
Yeah. So when I talk to students about that, like a lot of them don't have LinkedIn accounts. when they start, and I'm like, well, just get one. And then I'm also like, and also just make your other accounts private and think about scrubbing them, because like I remember going to grad school and hearing that like some of the people in my class almost didn't get in because the program directors had looked at all of their Facebook accounts and they were like, you seem to party a lot. We don't like explain why we'd want you there, right?
See, like if I'm at the point where like if someone finds something that I've put out that says outrageous, right, and they're not in the position to contact me about it and talk it through, I don't want to work with them in the first place. If that makes sense, like it's my way of almost screening people I work with.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've got a guy who.
Well, not everyone's as punk rock as you, Nevin. Right.
That's the thing, though. Is it punk rock, or is it just not giving a fuck? Is it nihilism?
Isn't punk rock not giving a fuck? Isn't that kind of the authentic?
Sure.
Punk rock is the DIY.
Yeah, but the punk rock
caring.
intersects with the Nazis and the fascists,
well,
right?
Like, I don't know. About
like not giving a fuck. Here's a question I struggle with. Fascism in itself is basically just meaning like the guy in charge does whatever he wants, and its core, right? Mm-hmm. Is that not freedom? Is that not punk rock? Like in my head, I struggle. Am I a fascist, or am I a libertarian? Am I punk rock? Am I hip hop? Or am I a nihilist who just doesn't give a fuck? Or am I just trying to be happy? Like that's the linear thinking, I think.
I don't know. To me, you're really arguing semantics a lot there. Like, what does this mean, right? Because, like, sure, I mean, based on your premise that you said there, like, the fascist is sort of being punk rock, but he's the only one. It's not a punk rock movement. It's
he's the only one who's allowed to be the punk.
Yeah, well, no, he's the only one who's doing that, right? Whereas the original punk rock was like sort of movement based,
anarchistic, tub thumper, chumbawamba. I get knocked down.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the Clash,
do you
and
know
the Sex Pistols,
do you know
and
the
like
story
this idea
of that
like,
song though?
We're going against an industry and an ethos that we don't agree with. We're going against the sort of ideals of the generations that came before us, and that, you know, like most movements like that, cultural or otherwise, they tend to sort of get co-opted at some point, right? But like
the guy in Surrey.
The way I thought you were using that word of punk rock is in that vein. Right?
Yeah.
So
I guess I play with it a lot because when you play with it a lot, then people can't pin you down. And we're in this world where
conceivably you could say hip hop was punk rock.
Hip hop is punk
originally,
rock.
Right?
Like,
yeah.
Rock and roll
right?
is punk rock just previously, right? Like, you know, reggae is punk rock, right?
Well,
like you can, right? Like the Rastaman was not loved in Jamaica.
No.
He was hated.
No.
He was an
Actually,
outsider.
I was reading an article the other day about Jamaica and how all the Rastamen and the sort of cultural components of Jamaica are super worried right now about the legalization of cannabis, because all the big companies are like at their doorstep and they're like, we're going to lose this cultural component that makes Jamaica authentic and makes it the Rastaman place.
But that's the thing, though.
But
it was a largely Christian population, and the Rastaman was hated. He was the dirty, garbage, scummy guy. He wasn't loved, right?
But,
and you know the rude boy.
But there's a lot of colonialism in that.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right. That's not.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Very complicated.
Because the Rastafarianism movement was actually just supposed to be a black empowerment movement, and it became actually a black power religion.
Yeah.
It's super complicated.
It's super complicated, and we're not really we're like the two whitest guys to be talking about this.
Oh yeah,
so.
yeah. I've only ever found a Bob Marley biography in a library once and rented it. That's it.
Like there's no quite like I love reggae and I love the sort of culture that came from there and the imagery, but it's not mine. I certainly don't claim it or anything like that.
Absolutely
I
not.
Find it fascinating and I hope that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think it's also interesting to see people, how they view, like, Bob Marley, right? Like, how he's, like, this saint among men, and they forget, like, he did not treat his wife very well at all. Like, he had concubines and, like...
I don't know if they were concubines, but yeah,
they're close to
affairs, right? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sort of heroes of that era or icons of that era that didn't necessarily, Bob Marley, Muhammad Ali. But
everyone's got interesting pasts.
But also you sort of, I think the iconoclast portion comes from what their sort of peak good works were, and not their sort of
that's
flaws.
interesting.
But isn't there an element of like their flawed humanness made them more authentic.
Totally.
Right? I think that's part of this, right? Like, it's certainly when I see people that are trying to represent themselves as these, like, just squeaky clean perfection, like, it's like, well,
and then I guess there's the
that's
people,
not me, right? That's not real people that I know. So
and then there's
I don't
like,
trust you.
Oh, here, I'm going to reveal my heart to you, but I'm still going to put this filter, make sure my makeup's all good too, right? Like, I struggle with that a lot. And then there's I struggle with, like, okay, now they're doing a face reveal of no makeup, right? Like, I'm using just the makeup world just because, like, I'm all in love with this idea of filters of, like, now Facebook is putting these filters on people to make them come out of their shell because now they're taking the appearance of Batman, right? They have a digital mask, so they're more bold to say a video comment.
I don't like to give Facebook credit for thinking like that. I think we're actually putting deeper meaning to what they're doing when really they're just straight copying Snapchat.
Sure.
And something that they did to, like, just draw attention to make it a more interesting feature, right? Like, so many...
No, Snapchat just
like,
made it people comfortable going in front of the camera because they're only sharing to friends and family they're comfortable talking to.
Yeah, but you're right in that sense. What the behavior now is trained, and thus it can be extrapolated across other social media, right? I feel like that's the kind of thing. But I also think that, like, there's this sort of constant desire to ascribe this deeper meaning and this deeper sort of intellect to tech companies when that sort of abdicates the duty of looking at them from a capitalist perspective, from a sort of control perspective, and oftentimes their maneuvers, their strategies, their sort of even their features make far more sense from that perspective than they do from this, like, oh, it's a whole new ethos of big tech, and it's wonderful, and it comes with philanthropy and all these other things. And it's like, well, or are they just like total monopolistic corporations?
Oh, totally.
And they behave as such, and that we've given them a free pass, and now we are at their mercy. Right?
See, that's where I think you're wrong about being at their mercy, right? And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Just the idea of, like, the stands. You know, if we use the stand metaphor from Eminem, because you understand what a stand is, right? The stands can demand Eminem to do something, and if they really, really demand it, and he cares about his image, he'll do it, right? So, like, if
it makes sense for him,
if it makes sense for him, right?
Yeah.
But with this, Eminem's already made his money, right? He doesn't care about, right? But if you're a 30-year-old up-and-comer and the stands demand something of you,
you're almost certainly going to do it.
You're almost certainly going to do it,
yeah.
Right? So,
at least if you think it.
And if the stands don't like you, they just move on, right? And then they just get dropped, right? And so in the hip hop culture, the idea of some of these guys is very, like, sad because you literally know they're in it to make money, blow up, get their money, and if they're gone, right?
Yeah.
Like they're like. The mentality literally is a 24-hour living for them, right?
No.
But if you really look at the ones who really make it, you got to have the 10-year mentality, right?
Absolutely. You got to have the build for the future. But even then, some of them get got. Like, I think, I really became fascinated with Nipsey Hussle.
Oh, everyone did, right?
Yeah, I think, and that Victory Lap album is incredible. Like,
yes.
When I finally listened to that album, like, front to back, I was like, holy crap, this is like new wave West Coast hip hop that's got real rhymes. It's got, like,
it's real L.A. Crenshaw. He's got
like,
the whole
and
community behind him.
He's actually paying homage to some of the sounds that made hip hop what it was from the West Coast and all those things. Whether that's early Dre or
nostalgia,
NWA.
man.
There's a nostalgia, but there's a modernness to it. Right?
Totally.
It was a brilliant album, right? And I think for me listening to that, I was also like,
I got an album for you if you like that out of Vancouver,
right?
Too.
Yeah, but so I just find, like, I find hip hop interesting. I think that hip hop in some ways it self-perpetuates some of its bad things, and it doesn't self-perpetuate some of its good things. And I think that's a really kind of unique component of hip hop.
Yeah. Yeah, like he definitely was, like, this positive force in hip hop. And you see it now. You got YG, first track of the White Sneaker or something or other, right? He pays his homage, right? And you're seeing everyone, continue the marathon to keep that going, right? Which has become a meme in itself. It's interesting watching Gary Vaynerchuk because he believes strongly, the negative always outweighs the positive. You could look at tourist reviews of tourist companies, right? Like, let's just talk about the fucking Yelp review system world of how
TripAdvisor.
It's a mafia in some states in the States to have a good positive review, right? Because the stands have either gamed it or the companies have gamed it, right? Like who's gamed it, right? So it's very
but isn't gaming something like truly capitalist?
Oh yeah,
right. Like
right.
It's totally the kind of thing where it's like, oh no, I gamed the system. I'm punk rock. When
Wow.
actually you're like, you gamed it for money, making yourself a capitalist.
It's socialism now, meaning you try to just be a good businessman and just not fuck with people and game attention. Is that what? Can we rewrite what socialism is? Like it literally just means.
I think that needs to happen. I think that socialism is one of the most misused words.
Absolutely.
Because it's used as an epitaph in some cases, right? Like socialism is for whatever.
It makes it sound like socialist means
right? But,
like Nazi. Like let's make that like direct correlation, which I don't want to go to, but that's the manner and the context people are using it.
Yeah, which is part of the epitaph and part of the like misunderstanding of it. I think like to me the most interesting political party out there is Democratic Socialists. I look at that in America and I look at what they're sort of representing in this idea. And, it's sort of strange for us as Canadians because even our conservatives have very socialist leanings because of our system, right? They don't identify as such, right? They want to pretend like they don't have that.
Let's talk about the farming industry.
But you can't get
agriculture.
I don't want to talk about like
commodities.
To me, those are things that are part of like the way in which power structures and capitalism uses sort of itself against regular people, right? Like everyone who's like wants to pretend they're like a super like capitalist always talks about free markets, but then what they do is they go and use government subsidies and market regulation to limit
horrible.
Competition and all those things, and yet they want to pretend like free markets will solve the world. And markets can have their advantages, right? Like the idea of efficiency coming from markets is probably relevant, but at the same time, I mean, I've always thought of economics as this kind of like flawed structural base. It's useful for measurement, but it's not necessarily. I think. But this idea, I
think with free markets, and so many people talk about free markets, right? I think that if we want to talk yin and yang, we talk then free press, right? And so many people then misunderstand what free markets mean and what free press means, and how regulations and stuff all intertwine, like the yin and yang of it.
Mm-hmm.
And not many people really can see the balance of it all, I find, and it's very, very interesting how they understand it this way, but they don't realize you change one word, it comes out to be the other side.
And I would also say, like, we often talk about, like, we want free markets or we want free press, but what we really mean is we want a better version of a somewhat regulated market or a somewhat regulated free press.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want true, like, you can say whatever you want, or your market must be, like, just absolutely unregulated.
Canada doesn't technically have free speech. It doesn't. Free speech is an American term and word.
Well, the idea of it as a constitutional right.
We have an understanding of what free speech means in Canada under our own lens, and it's not the same as what people think it is, which is quite interesting as well, right? Like, because the whole Kevin Gaudreau, alt-white guy in Peterborough, I don't know.
I don't know him.
He's a weirdo Nazi, right?
I think the idea that people can say whatever they want and they don't get sort of put in their place, or that people don't push back on them, that is where we're at. Like this idea that anybody's opinion or their ideas matter when we know that we as humanity invalidated those ideas before I was born, right?
Yeah.
Like this idea that you can bring back like flawed things that now have sort of new prestige because of the internet and because longer. And I think actually this is an interesting argument, because if you talk about education and the disruption around education and the sort of declining sort of effectiveness of it, even at the lower levels of early childhood, elementary and high school, like the idea that education used to lead us to know, like, oh no, that was wrong, or we solved that already and we know the answer to those things.
Oh, no biting, but little
now,
Susie.
Exactly. But
like,
now, even as you're growing up and you're being told what we as humanity have created in terms of canon of knowledge, you're also looking at it online and being like, well, I hear all these countervailing points. I hear all these countervailing opinions, and I'm not totally sure what I'm ever going to be able to believe. And I think that's a really dangerous way to grow up.
It's muddling people's understanding.
Certainly,
right?
That's a good way to put it.
So,
it's muddling. It's also muddling. Can anything be true anymore?
Totally.
And that's when
right?
you talk about deepfakes and AI and things like that.
Absolutely.
Like if we live in an era where we don't trust anything, what matters? I don't know.
Well, I guess I'm a nihilist already. So let's go back. So there's this really
nihilist dude.
There's this really great YouTube video, and it's called The World of Wondery. Who is the doomer, right? There's this whole meme of the doomer, the boomer, the bloomer, and the zoomer, right? So the doomer is the realist of the world and sees it in a negative lens. The boomer is the blissfully ignorant of the world and is just living life, right? Had it on easy all life. You've got the bloomer.
Baby boomers, cough.
Yeah. Come at me, bruh. The bloomer is a guy who understands adversity and is coming out of it and is trying to make a positive change. Our Nipsey Hussles, right? And then the zoomer, I don't remember who he is. He's just a weirdo or whatever. But there's a really great video about it, right? And so when I say I'm a nihilist, that video goes on to basically say,
I don't think you're a nihilist.
But that's the thing, though, is once you actually become a nihilist, you realize the only purpose of life is what you give meaning, right? So nihilism works against nihilism, making you care again. Does that make sense, right? And so we're at this interesting world where so many people are just muddling and muddling and muddling and muddling because they have a pulpit and they think it's funny or good or it's making them money, because there is some unregulatedness of information and education, because communication is just education. I want to share this message with you, right?
Well, I would argue that communication is not education, right? As someone who works in education, I obviously still want to hold on to that somewhat, right? So you're sort of attacking things that I want to defend, but I'm not going to do that right now.
But I also believe
think like this idea of communication is not so much to me it's more marketing, right? And it's more selling attention.
For sure.
Right?
For sure,
and
right?
Doing things that attract attention because attention has somehow become commoditized.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Not
right?
somehow. It's become commoditized through the tech platforms.
100% has been commoditized, right? I've made money off attention, right? It's just a fact. I guess I boil it down to the people who hand their smartphones to their 2-year-olds, right? Like that communication is now educating them, right? And so the way I look at Netflix, right? It's okay, what are they promoting to me this month? Okay, I get it. It's Pride Month. You've got your series to build off that. Mm-hmm. I'm comfortable. It doesn't bother me, right? But it's okay, am I paying them to educate me on their values now, or am I paying them for a service that used to give me access to a great library of nostalgia for me? You know what I mean? I'm very interested. Let's go back to the government world.
A couple of different things, because the Netflix recommendation algorithm is only a sort of feature of the service, right?
But now they have the whole preview of, hey, what's coming up and what's our flavor of the month and what's trending, right? So it's once you buy into the community, right? I think there's always an intersection of when there's curation meets community, right? We're seeing it hard on YouTube.
I never really thought about Netflix as community. I always thought of it more as
what's trending,
as curation. But the trending and those kind of things for sure. But I think you're right that the sort of the media service that they provide has created community around it, because now we see things that are the same. And it's not necessarily new. It's just sort of changed format, because we used to have monoculture water cooler television.
Sure.
And now we sort of have monoculture streaming occasionally, but in far smaller.
But let's look at Spotify, right?
Niche.
I can see my friends what they're listening to, so I kind of trust maybe the recommendations more of a couple of things on Spotify for whatever reason,
but I would
more
say
than Netflix, because I can't see who are they profiling me with versus I know some of the data that they're using to make recommendations, because I saw my buddy Luke watch that movie. I'm going to watch it too, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
I think we don't want Netflix to know who our friends are, or they currently do not know who
Yes.
our friends are, right?
Like,
so from my understanding, they're generally using their algorithm is based off of what you watch, but also what they want to show you, right? Like that's my understanding. Is
But I think
what
they
want
take
to promote,
from the
right?
pool of all their data of all people
like,
they're assuming
people
are
who
like.
watch things like Nevin watches.
Yeah.
Like these shows. Let's
See, I
want to
see the data because like on Facebook and
like
Twitter
they're
you can
gonna show
see.
you their algorithms, man. This is
But that's
literally their intellectual property.
But as a Canadian, right? Like Impark, I need to serve them a letter going like, "Hey guys, I paid your $100, you fucking mafia. I now want to see all your fucking data you have on me because that's my right as a human."
You make a Freedom of Information Act request, and maybe
I got a template. I just got to fill it out.
So I hope to hear it from it because screw Impark. They can eat a bag of dicks.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
I literally sat on the fucking charges to get it to the most amount just to like eventually be like, fuck you. Like it just made me like paying them more money made me feel like I fucked them more in a really fucked up way.
I don't even know what to say to that one. I was going to go back to the algorithms though for a second because I find that like I'm interested in algorithms in the sense of what you talked before about gaming the system in some ways, right? And like I never really thought about this, but when Greta Van Vliet, you know that band, is that what they're called?
I have no idea.
It's like a rock band that sounds like Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
They're kind of good. Like
are they new?
Yeah, they're like within the last couple of years.
I think someone like made a comment about them on like a forum or something saying, "Hey, someone sells these people. They're not Led Zeppelin or something."
Well, yeah, because they do sound a lot like Led Zeppelin. And it was really an interesting sort of thing when they came out because when I first heard them, I was like, "Oh crap, this is like really interesting that like young people, because they're all young guys, are making music like this. They clearly are drawing on the influences of like 70s rock and roll." And they do kind of sound a bit like, well, not kind of, they're kind of like a Led Zeppelin cover band, but they also are writing their own stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But when I started to read a couple of articles about this album that came out from them, the most interesting opinion I heard was basically like, this is algorithmically designed music, right? Where it's basically, you sound like these bands that other people are going to be listening to, so you will be recommended by the algorithm, right? Like,
Very
so like if you've listened to Fleetwood Mac at some point, or you've liked a Led Zeppelin song on Spotify, because people who use those systems often aren't listening to albums, they're listening to playlists or songs, and then thus you're sort of creating this weird profile that the algorithm then recommends to you, also based off your friends.
Which is very
interesting. But
interesting.
now this sounds like an amalgamation of like all these things that fit the algorithm, guitar-driven, singing, whatever it is, right? So now it's going to be served up more than actual like new styles of music that
I'm going to pull this into back to Kamloops.
You would struggle to like if you sort of invented a new sound right now, right? Like
City
even
Morgue. City Morgue.
I don't know City Morgue.
I played for them for you yesterday.
Okay, yeah.
The metal rap.
Yeah, the metal rap-ish, right?
Like, yeah.
But like, how do they sort of? They're going to break the algorithm in a bad way of like, we don't know how to recommend this versus.
No, but they will because they sound like Tekashi 6ix9ine because Tekashi 6ix9ine came from them.
They'll get recommended from that. You're right.
And they've got their notoriety on YouTube, which is a whole different algorithm.
Yeah, but I think the kind of point was interesting because it made me think of like, in the past, the biggest musical artists ended up being these like cross-generational, cross-genre hits. Like when you had a hit that was like acceptable to
like
country, hip-hop, pop, rock and roll, like it would just be like boom, everywhere. Like
Foreigner's been great for years.
They're
lots intergenerational.
Lots of songs like
Rush,
Journey.
Right?
Like, you know, like occasionally there are these bands that like make these hits, but it's
but did Journey come back because of fucking Glee, or did Journey?
No, Journey came back because of Sopranos.
But see, I never watched Sopranos, right? That skipped my generation. Skipped my world.
I don't think so. From my understanding, when the Sopranos used Journey as the closing song, that brought back that song onto the charts.
Oh, I don't disbelieve it.
And then once it got on the charts, everybody saw it, or like kids who were watching Sopranos with their parents saw this, and they were like, "What's this band?" And then that song became this, because it's such a great sing-along song.
Yeah,
it came back and sort of entered the pop culture at a whole other level, right?
Which again is like communications education, man. Like you're educating people now, right? Like that, like
sure,
like you want to talk about Good Charlotte?
Right?
Good Charlotte popped off because of fucking like Tony Hawk Pro Skater or some one of those weird shitty not shitty,
Oh,
but
yeah,
like one of
I
those.
used to find that so fascinating, the way that video game songs would.
Or the skate
Right.
videos, man. Like there's certain songs.
Ski videos used to be like
Oh my
total
gosh.
sources of music and snowboard videos.
Just
oh my
to
God.
get a
I'm
free-
pretty sure we found out about Rage Against the Machine from a snowboard video.
Just
like
the
one
distribution
of
of
our older
magazine
brothers.
shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah, no, and he like ordered it like and
Oh,
got
yeah.
a Rage Against the Machine album that like we then all made bootleg cassette tapes of
Totally.
because you couldn't get it another way. And then the next thing you know, they were huge, right? But it was literally like snowboard videos that were these sources of new music, right? So
it's very, very fascinating to me. Of like, there's just oh my gosh.
But can I,
can't
push
remember
back on
some-
this education for a moment? Because I think that communication can be education if people then follow up on it, right? Because
True.
what I find is that when I discover something new through social media or whatever it is, I'll then be like, oh, what's this? Like if something random pops up on YouTube that I like,
Yep.
I'll then Google it and read their Wikipedia page and be like, oh, they know these influencers, or they're from this area, or from like what's their story. But I don't think that as many people do that as we want to give credit for. I think people oftentimes just stop at the surface and don't try and understand.
Maybe you're using education in the academia world, where I'm
Of
using.
course I am, Nevin.
Okay, so you're using academia. I'm just using like brainwashing, right? Like, just like if I keep on saying the same thing over and over again, or like if I kept on not wearing shoes to your class over and over again, right? Like,
But is that brainwashing or is that marketing? 'Cause isn't marketing just the best form of brainwashing that we've invented so far?
isn't marketing supposed to be brainwashing where the business actually cares about the consumer?
No, marketing is supposed to be where the business cares about the consumer's money.
No, I see. That's where I think my generation, this new like, be your best self generation, has been a little bit pampered, right? But also has now the skill set and the understanding of some harsh realities to bring out this new like way of just like, hey, just straight up, I care about your business. I'll give you the best service and the best whatever.
Sure, there's sort of brand as lifestyle or brand as values and things like that. Like those are very real, but like
But people can pull back the filters pretty easily in about
do
5
they?
years. In 5 years, for sure.
what do you mean? Like
Like
learn about a company that way?
No,
Or-
I think we're just going to be where social media is just going to be so integrated. Like we're talking like from like Amazon ordering to our fridge to your belt telling you if you lost a pound. That like if you're an influencer or whatever it be, right? Like look at the news anchors, right? They're supposed to be beautiful individuals, right? Like look at NHL players or NBA stars, right? There's this hierarchy of like if you've made it to this level, you have to be the best person and perpetuate the best stuff out there. You know what I mean?
these are myths that we've made ourselves, but
But the manufacturing of regulations, whatever be, right? Like you can't be a news anchor, and have something in your personal life really come to light and still have that position. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, you're supposed to be relatively clean.
right? So
Yeah.
like they're good morning sunshine, right? Like it's it's all happy, right? Like so then it starts putting the meme of goodness back out there, and right now like I don't think there's a lot of meme of goodness in the free content world. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot, because it's mostly 4chaners, because they're the ones who've been growing up and knowing how to like do this stuff at scale because of the hive mind.
Well, I would also say that I think there's a component of this of nobody quite knows what will ultimately go viral, right? Like there's nobody's figured that out yet, right?
For sure.
And oftentimes what you're giving credit to these 4chaners and these younger people who are sort of versed in meme culture of is simply being aware of memes and knowing when and where to use them, not of inventing them or
Totally.
of creating them
Totally.
or of sort of manifesting new ones, right? They're simply using them as communication, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it's really interesting because when I first heard the word meme, I had to look it up because I actually read it in a book. I read it in Callie Lassen's book, Culture Jam, the guy who founded Adbusters.
Oh, really?
Because he
Interesting.
was all over memes before the internet, essentially,
They're
right?
called
He was-
macros back in the day.
he was on memes because he thought that the sort of ultimate battle for social structure and against capitalism and things like that would be fought with memes. So he was actually right.
Yeah.
But I think he thought that we would actually try and fight it rather than
embrace it.
Embrace it and use it to poison ourselves.
Which is
more,
why the
right?
doomer meme is very, very interesting, right? Because the doomer actually comes around and starts kind of breaking his shell, right? Like, so there's this level of like and the NPC, right? The non-playing character, right? Anyone is an NPC, right? Like everyone sees himself as the NPC. It transcends.
I think everyone sees themselves as the main character, and that's part of the problem is they don't realize that they're being treated as an NPC.
But when you read Calvin
system.
and Hobbes, right? Like I view it as lens of I'm Calvin, this ADHD crazy character.
Yeah.
And you when you read it, who do you see yourself? Or are you just purely reading for entertainment?
Well, when I read it when I was a kid, I was Calvin.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
But you know, can someone else in the Nevin Power world not do that same sort of thing? Right? Like Calvin in itself is almost a non-playing character, though it is the only character. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. I don't know. I think
because
when
you're
he's
the
the main character, he is the RPG.
But when
right?
you are the only player, the only character in these memes of like Pepe or Trollface or Rage Flip Out guy, whatever meme you are, right? You become the meme, right? And that's the power of it, right? It's only recently we started like calling it people like NPCs, right? Because everyone wants to think they're the main character, but they realize
I've honestly never heard anybody refer to themselves as an NPC.
Like you've never heard that term, or
no? I know what an NPC is in games. I've just never heard people think of themselves.
It's like a derogatory term, like kind of like calling someone like a Russian bot, or like just like another, just another whatever, right? Like trying to dismiss that they do have importance in someone's life and that they are a unique individual.
Okay, so you said 4chan, never been there. Where do you think other sources of memes as communication and as language are coming from?
Like old days would be E-Bomb's World Jib Jab,
well, no,
right?
Old
but
days.
now
I
you got
now.
But now you got you got 9gag, but the biggest scary thing is private Instagrams run by 8-year-olds trying to out edgelord each other, and
that's terrible. Yeah. I've also been recently sort of opened up to this world of airdropping,
like using like your iPhone and just sharing on.
So apparently this is like
that's like pirate boxes back in the day.
Okay, I don't know what that is either.
Like people would like leave like a USB stick and you just come and plug in,
Oh,
or you
and
make
see
a
what
little
was on there?
Wi-Fi router
Okay.
and you can just log into
Yeah.
the browser and be like,
Yeah.
ooh, here I want to share some files.
So now you're doing like mid-level old man stuff, right? Like where I was like, we had cassette tapes from snowboard.
Dude, I know. I
Now
grew
you're
up
like,
with
we
all
had-
of it.
Yeah,
Dude,
no,
like
I know you're just transitional.
I'm an
person,
interloper.
right? But no, apparently like the hot sort of spreading of memes right now for young people is like when they go to large gathering events, concerts or parties, basically they all open up airdrop and they're all sharing
It's exclusivity.
memes as like a thing of like, this is how we're engaging, or this is what I'm feeling in like this event. Like I've never really been exposed to it, but I've read a couple of articles recently from tech journalists about how this is actually how sort of cutting edge users are engaging with technology, that they're not necessarily going full platform, they're going off platform.
Totally.
And I thought it was really kind of an interesting way, because in some ways it's
leveling the playing field.
It's leveling the playing field, but also it's getting away from the digital paper trail.
Totally.
As well, right? Like, I mean, I guess you'd end up with all those pictures on there, but like, you could just delete them, right? Like,
It's very like that was the whole idea of the pirate box or whatever it be. Like, and I legit looked into like building my own and like hiding in the roof of like a Starbucks or whatever it be, right? Like, there's a lot of nefariousness that builds into that too, right? But it's very interesting how these
stick this random USB into my computer.
It's like a lot of people don't understand. A lot of these kids have their like personal profile, and then they got their spam profile, and then they got their meme profile, and then they got their anon profile, right? Like there used to be a day when you could only have one Instagram account, and then you had to log in, log out to like post from a different account.
Who's gaming that? Is it the kids gaming the system, or is it Instagram gaming stock numbers? Right?
I don't know.
Certainly, their growth rate is the main factor in the Facebook stock price.
Totally.
Right? Like this idea that Facebook has this many people on there when like I don't know.
But a lot of these kids actually abandon some of these massive meme accounts because they can't monetize, because that attention is not valuable.
Sure, but Facebook can still count it as an account that has followers and users.
Totally, because the engagement is insane
in their quarterly reports.
Right? And the offline monetization of clout within a school system is something else, right? So that in itself, is a whole different gamification of it all. Which, going back to like my grad sim, like I literally love that I have it on my LinkedIn to flick through and like remind myself, because I've crashed too many hard drives and lost too many files, and even
you
Google
just
Drive.
uploaded it to your LinkedIn. That's fascinating. I should think about doing that with some
It's
of mine.
like and it's connected to SlideShare somehow. Microsoft owns SlideShare and it's connected to LinkedIn and shit.
Okay.
And it's really like legit. Like there's certain files in my Google Drive I can't download. I don't know why. They're just like it's fucking weird, man. And like my grad sem's one of them. So I'm lucky I have a couple of copies saved all over the place where legit I consider leaving content on anonymous hidden accounts and places on the internet, so I can only remember where they are to pick up that content, because I don't trust other stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's fucked, man.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really interesting component of this, especially as we've entered this just store everything in the cloud world. Right, like one of the more interesting things I heard recently was a guy who had bought a bunch of movies through iTunes.
Yeah.
And he'd bought a bunch of like independent type movies, right? Like from like independent studios, and basically, paid the full iTunes price to own the movie.
Yeah.
Right? But then one day opened up his library and they were gone.
Yeah.
And Apple basically responded to him. He wrote to them and said, where did all these movies go? And he had the list, the itemized list, and all that sort of stuff. And they were like, well, we no longer have relationships with those distributors, so those are no longer on our system.
Yeah.
Here's one free $5 credit for iTunes. And he lost,
Jesus
10
Christ.
or so movies, let's say, right?
It was like
But he was literally like, I'm going to go back to analog collecting
Yeah.
because you can't take that away from me, mega corporation.
Right. So let's talk about
Like, what happens if Google just loses a bunch of drive? Like I don't
Totally.
I certainly don't trust it as my only source of where I leave things.
Well,
It's
that's where-
convenient to put things there and have access wherever,
Totally.
but like I always make sure that I have multiple other copies.
That's
right?
where I actually only value myself for what I can create, not what I've created.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I lose something at this point, like it's lost, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah.
I have the skill set to recreate it to make it more contextual and better.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I don't have my grad sim.
Right? Like, but just the idea of like, even the option of archiving, or even the chance to archive something, the fact that we could have this conversation, like imagine if we had all the conversations we've ever had, right?
Oh, wouldn't that be fascinating?
Yeah, it'd be fucking weird as shit.
Yeah, I find that to be one of the most interesting aspects of that show and movie Limitless.
Oh yeah.
The idea that it's not about completely being able to process new information at an incredible rate of speed, but it's about just simply recall improving. Like if your recall just improved 20%, you'd be like a super genius all of a sudden if you could
Totally.
remember all the ideas or things that had been said to you. Right? Like that's amazing.
Which is hard for people to understand. Like I'm currently taking Ritalin or whatever with my doctor, though I don't technically have an ADHD diagnosis or whatever it be, right? But I'm watching some YouTube stuff where someone who clearly is telling it, and it's just like, I'm like, oh, I understand all that. Okay, cool. I can't switch thoughts like other people. You know what I mean? Or if a thought comes in, I have to acknowledge it, and I have to physically shift gears and go back into the conversation. Where some people they'll just be able to keep that out of their head and keep their lane free, right? So trying to explain that where someone might say something to me like, oh, you didn't hear me the first time. I'm like, no, literally, you talked to me and I wasn't listening. Your first say was you getting my attention. Now, once you have my attention, what are you going to say?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is a very honestly digital way of viewing my thoughts. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that is really an interesting.
When I say
also thinking about impressions, not digital, but when you think about how we used to always talk about making a good first impression, but in the digital space, it's no, you're going to yell at me 3 or 4 times, and then I'll pay attention on the 3rd or 4th.
7 times,
time,
right?
right?
7 times your ad has to be out there before
and then
someone
I sort of notice and
notice
pay
you,
attention.
right?
Yeah.
So you think of that, but you think of going back to school teachers, right? Miss Walker. My grade 1 teacher is actually one of the that's one of the few teachers' names I actually remember. Mm-hmm. Why do I remember her? Because that was my very first real teacher, right? And that's just an impression, right? You go to Gladwell, right, and say, oh yeah, you have 5 seconds to make an impression on people. Well, that's because that you literally are walking by them at that point, right? Now we're in a world where you can bombard someone with impressions of who you are if you want to hyper target them, right?
Yeah.
Like, and at that point it's like, okay, right? What is that now?
Yeah, but isn't there the danger there of like you're bombarding me with impressions, but I can't trust any of your impressions because
True.
I don't trust anything on all these platforms anymore, right? Like
Totally.
right. So like,
But that's where like the exclusivity.
I need to beat you to take the measure of a man. You know,
Absolutely,
like those kind
right?
of things, right?
So we're almost at this weird point where like the kids with the airdrop world, right? Like, you know, you want to be the cool kid who's in the town over, right? And you're at the party, right? You now have a way of almost validating you were there, right? So you're creating a trading card game, right? Like, and so now they've created literally the distribution and the product, right? And for years, trading card games have been building it into these kids, right? So now there's a new level of exclusivity. Now there's value again of that impressions, and it builds and builds and builds.
Yeah, well, I just find it so interesting about that because it's location based. Like it's actually tied to physical proximity.
So different than Google Maps saying, "Hey, want to rate a review?" Like you make the correlation, but they're offline.
Actually, you brought up Yelp earlier, and I thought about how the Google sort of boxes has been replaying that. Did you hear about the Genius lyrics thing?
Like
this weekend?
Rap Genius?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they rebrand as Genius.
Yeah. So, which is it's a fantastic service. I
Yeah,
think it's incredible,
all hip hop,
right?
love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's incredible. But so if you didn't hear about this, there's like a Wall Street Journal article and video attached to it where basically several years ago Genius started accusing Google of scraping their content and using it. So like if you Google song lyrics, Google gives you that info box right now.
Yeah.
that has lyrics in them. So what Genius started to do, this is actually genius, air quotes, was they started to change the apostrophes. So they'll do straight apostrophes and curved apostrophes in their song lyrics, and they did them in Morse code to spell out red-handed. And then Google now serves up these scraped things with the apostrophes in Morse code. So they basically use this to sort of prove that Google was scraping their content. But of course, Google is...
I love Easter eggs.
Is third part. It's like an amazing Easter egg. I thought it was like... I was like, this is not only like a cool Easter egg, but you like branded it in a legal way, right?
Totally.
Like to like prove this, and just so. And you're also using like old school analog Morse code in the digital world, right? I just thought like there's so many layers to this, but also just this idea that like what's the benefit of us getting information from Google is, you know, we don't have to go off the SERP, the search engine results page, but like Google is destroying the people that are providing that information, but they've also legally set up a structure where they are third-party provider of lyrics from some Canadian company, actually, who's actually probably they're the ones who's scraping Genius and then serving it to Google. But you know, I just thought it was a really interesting kind of a way, but
that goes back to like man outwitting bot script machine.
Goes back to AI. Being run by intelligent humans is probably the ultimate expression of AI, right?
It's also opens us up to possibly true freedom, in theory. Right? Like what is true freedom? The freedom to just be happy? I think it's possible with you know, technological advances and, you know, some decent people at the helm, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, freedom would mean, you know, working because it's coming out of you and you want to, and that you're sort of your Maslow's hierarchies of needs, lower levels are being met, and you're pursuing top levels. But
let's go to the giving tree shit, right? Like,
well, we've commoditized all those things, and it'll be interesting to see if we can survive the commoditization of those basic needs.
But I think the commoditization had to happen, right? That's right. Like,
well, this goes back to our free market economics argument of like the efficiency of those basic needs had to be improved through commoditization in some ways, but that opened the door for the abuse of them.
Totally. But it's gotten to this point, and we can only change one thing, right? So,
I don't think we can change one thing. I mean, if we can
change the future.
If we could only change one thing, well, okay, we can only change the future. Yeah,
right.
That's fair. If that's what you're saying, I was like,
See, I like talking in memes or like
if we could only change one thing, I'm like, we're screwed. If we could only pick one, right? Like,
see, I think that's also like the fun part of like podcasting and that sort of stuff is like you can have people like me, like, low-key bring stuff in to, like, always, you know, you were going to go one way, and then I just go, okay, you know, like, and right, it's that in itself is just, like, fun talent, like, having a good laugh, but that is also something you can't really get in the traditional, but in itself, I think, helps balance out the highly curated, you know what I mean, where it's still, like, it's the curation of, hey, let's just have a laugh and be two good dudes having coffee, because I don't think a lot of people can do that at all.
Yeah. Well, I find podcasting to be really interesting. I don't have the same perspective of you because I don't produce them and make them on my own, but I listen to a ton of them. And what I find kind of one of the more interesting components of it is it's access that you wouldn't normally get. Like, you basically just listen to conversations. And sometimes they are curated in the sense of, like, somebody's on a book tour, so they're all of a sudden going to appear on, like, 3 different podcast feeds that I listen to. Or
they actually edit them, and right, so you cut out the ums and ahs, which maybe they cut out something more, right? But you never really know. But hey, it's what they want to project into the world.
Sure, yeah. But I also think it's just access that you would have never gotten in the past. That the depth and level of access, like even from a TV interview or like a 60 Minutes, you wouldn't have gotten the same level of, like, information. And there's, like you just said, there's no in some of those more curated and produced mediums. You don't get the opportunity for tangents. You don't get the opportunity for, like, somebody to just be like, well, actually, I know all about this. Let me explain it to you for 5 straight minutes and give you the real, so that everyone understands it, right? Like, I find that is, like, one of the more fantastic parts about podcasting.
But the flip side, of course, right? You have the Alex Joneses, right? Who then end up on Logan Paul's YouTube podcast, which is actually the largest podcast in the world because of the attention he commands, right?
Which is disgusting.
I know.
That's...
Right, like and so let's bring in Tom McDonald tangent. Tom McDonald is a Canadian, you know, with what is straight white male. He has a song. His latest song comes out. Mac Lethal actually wrote a diss track, and Tom McDonald dissed him back, and it's fucking funny.
Tell me, diss tracks, they're just content, right?
It's just like battle rap through.
No. I know what they are structurally, but, like,
just content.
People do that just because it's content, right? Like,
well,
we'll manufacture beef.
Totally,
with diss
a little
and
bit.
We'll have more videos, and
absolutely, right. So, like,
and also, like, do you think that a lot of that is because, like, some of these YouTubers, they want to be something else, right?
For sure, right? So, like, let's like
something more legitimate. Let's say like a musical artist.
Ooh, yeah, an entertainer.
Yeah. Well, I always think back to this.
Or have talent.
There was always this old adage in sports of, like, all athletes want to be rappers and all rappers want to be athletes, right? And all actors want to be
like
athletes
Shaq.
or rappers, right?
You know, Shaq has a track
absolutely.
with Mercules, right? Like, and that came about because of Mercules' Old Town Road remix.
Yeah.
Right now. Now Lil Nas X is performing at Calgary Stampede.
Just announced,
wow, there's a nice crossover of what is that? Hip hop, country music? No, it's trap. It's not hip hop because old heads won't want that. Blah 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 blah. Right? So, but it's very, very interesting because, like, that Old Town Road is the perfect image for Kamloops to, like, you know, build on or merit to build on. Right? They want to take their rockin' fest to the next level. They somehow get Lil Nas X to show up in 3 years so they can, you know, get kids.
But is he around in 3 years? Like,
Lil Nas X, I think so.
You think so?
Yeah, he was putting out memes for, like, months and months and months, like, scattering them all over the internet from different accounts.
So I played that song for somebody who hadn't heard it, and they'd read about it.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, play it for me. So we played it in the truck, and I was like, well, it's not like a genius level song, but it's, like, super catchy and fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and it's got some, like, interesting sonic components to it, right? And they were like, yeah, no, it's super catchy. But their question was, like, does he have a second song?
Yeah, he has an whole album coming out.
Sure, but does he have a second song? And my response was actually like, I'm not so sure that it matters if he has a second song, because he got to the level of popularity where other people are just going to feed him second songs, and that's going to be enough for him to have a career.
Totally.
Right? And that one song is enough to, like.
But he's also really, really smart in the sense that where he's positioned, how he's positioned himself. Like, he's already got, like, he shows up at a school, you know, and performs, and there's little kids in cowboy hats and boots jumping up and down, right, of, like, all colors, right, like that, and, like, and his image is, like, super squeaky clean because he's literally just some kid with $8 in his account, right, like, he's not a hood cat. That's not the image he's put out there, at least.
Yeah, and I think I'm curious about this as well, because him breaking onto the country music charts and then getting banned from them was his kind of street cred, viral making moment that kind of led to some of this. But also just the fact that like he crossed genres in that sense, and like maybe he is the first country rapper to go into the actual country genre
right
in
away,
a sense, right? Like right away, right?
Yeah.
And maybe to not.
Just like Lil Wayne could never really be a rock and roll guy, even though he wants to be rock and roll.
To be in some
and
ways,
Lil Wayne is a goat to the current rappers. Lil Wayne redefined the genre.
Yeah, well, and he also actually raps.
Yes,
he's got rhymes.
But he created the lean rap too, right?
Well,
because
I wouldn't say he created.
No,
but he certainly
he perpetuated the image and the look.
He mainstreamed it for sure, right?
If
you're talking about like lean,
Mumble
it
Man.
All starts with. Well, he did kind of start with.
He was the mumble,
but his mumble actually had raps in it, like
totally. And it was mumbling because he was leaned out.
Yeah.
So. But he's the goat to the current guys. Like he is the godfather.
I was actually just thinking about this the other day because like I'd never heard the term cloud rap.
What?
Cloud rap?
Cloud rap? Like SoundCloud rap?
No, like cloud rap I guess is like a micro genre kind of this where it's like Young Lean, the guy from Sweden. A lot of people think that he kind of invented it, where it's like this kind of like it's a component of this like atmospheric production, but like crossover with emo lyrics to your rapping, right? Like so
there's this guy in Vancouver named
last week.
ATK, and he's got a really album that it sounds like you're explaining it.
But I also, when I heard that, I thought about like there was this old Lil Wayne track of "I Feel Like Dying." That was like it was like basically bootleg because it had some sample from a band that didn't give him approval.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing it on like Sirius Radio when I was driving transport back in Vancouver back in the day, and like just like thought back to that being like, wow, that was like way ahead of its time when you consider the popularity of the emotional cloud atmospheric leaned out little population of rappers now, right?
Or even just the emo aspect of it all
right? Because like Micah
what
Peters
was emo? What was emo in high school? Emo was just someone who visibly wore what they were feeling on the inside. Is probably the best way to explain it, and everyone made fun of them, right? But now the emo kids are in charge in this weird way.
And can I tell you? So I think that's super interesting. And Micah Peters wrote a really interesting piece about rap becoming the new kind of emo and grunge-ish, and it was actually when who was the guy that died? Lil Peep.
Oh,
right when he died. This is when he wrote this article about
I love Lil Peep.
How significant this was, and how it was like, and he really caught my attention with being like, this guy is kind of Cobain-esque in his like influence and what that matters. And I thought that was really interesting. But the way emo came up just reminded me of like two stories recently that kind of are funny for me because, like what you said, like emo kind of got made fun of when it happened, and I certainly dismissed it when it was happening. Right?
I was an emo kid. I wore girl pants.
Sure, right. But like I was a little older than that, and I was into metal, so it was like emo's like.
Yeah, but I would go to the metal shows
whatever, right?
too, right?
Well,
but we were still made fun of in the metal shows.
Yeah, but this is what I found so.
We were the losers of the losers.
So get this. So a few years ago, I went to the PCMA conference down in Austin, Texas, and I was there early, a couple days early to just check out Austin. And I'm walking around the main bar strip, and like I stumble upon like this great sounding band night, and I go in there, and it turns out it was like all these like really young people, like 21, like as soon as they like basically, and I think some people were like underage for sure.
Yeah.
But there was like a lot of emo cover bands, and there was even like a whole room in this weird multi-room bar where they were just like packed in watching a concert video of one of these like big emo bands, and I was just like,
really?
Holy crap, it opened my eyes to like all this, like, and I was like, I really liked a lot of this sound because it had a lot of the components of metal that I really like, which are like often the more melodic breakdown components of like where they deconstruct and reconstruct a song and the riffs and stuff, so it had moments of that, but it then sparked this kind of like discussion, like where I brought it back to like the metal crew that I hang out with in Vancouver, and being like what do you guys think of emo? And then all of us basically had to admit that we have like some emo bands that we like, and then like one of the most I'll call him air quotes snobby, but one of the most particular metalheads who's like really curates his own listening and my listening as well because he's got a great taste. But he basically found a like list of the top like 100 emo things, and he's like, out of the top 10, he's like, I liked like 4 or 5 of these already before realizing that they were classified as emo.
This kid,
and so it was almost this like retro realization of like, hey, we should have like been
We
interested in emo back then, right? Like, but we out of hand dismissed it,
right? Because what was an emo kid? Oh, we played Game Boys, right? We had a MySpace page, right? So we were learning like HTML coding skills and all these weird promoing stuff, and because you put on a band or your friends a band, right? Like there was this new culture that was slowly developing, and now they're at my age,
extremely online before extremely online was a thing, right?
Exactly, right? And then they knew how to produce stuff, right? Because you had to have a friend with a studio, blah 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 blah, right? And that's no different than hip hop, and that's no different than any of the other stuff. But it's very interesting that like emo is now like so influential.
Yeah.
Like influential.
No.
And it's like, it's weird that you could pull up those Blender Years like photos and get weird cred from it. Or like we're in this world where like maybe someone should have checked on Lil Peep a little bit more too. Yeah. Right? Like I legit was fucked up when I heard the news.
Yeah.
But people would be like, oh, now you're a clout chaser. And like, no, I found Lil Peep because I found him at the top of our Trashy on Reddit months before he passed away. That's literally how I found out about one of my favorite artists of the last couple years, right? Because he sampled Under Oath, my favorite band of high school.
Oh.
Right?
I'm going to have to write this down.
Like,
Under Oath?
Under Oath, man. They were a Christian metalcore band, or emo, or whatever genre you wanted to call them, right? And they were my first actual, like, real concert, and you come home smelling like sweat and all that shit, and I bought the hoodie, right? And as an emo kid, you wore that fucking hoodie every day, right?
It's part of your identity.
It's part of your identity, right? Like, you scraped together $50, $70. You don't know how much money I had to scrape together to get the hood, and then you wanted to have the finger holes, right? Think of those finger holes in Lululemons. Those were fucking emo kids, man. We fucking pioneered that shit, right? And we got made fun of it, right? Like, this one emo kid, ended up becoming out as gay, and that was a big deal in the whole school, right? And that's an interesting hierarchy too, right? Like, right?
But
like,
isn't that the life cycle of most of these genres? Is like you're outcast and mocked and a pariah, and then you're commoditized and popularized, and everyone bandwagons on, and then you die, and then you're reborn in influence generations down the road. Right? Yeah. And you're right. Emo is significant in that sense. Interestingly enough, though, it wasn't as significant at the time. It seemed
it was super significant.
I mean,
right?
it was, but it certainly wasn't culturally or mainstream. Like, well, he came from like an emo core.
He come from
type band.
From First to Last, I think it was, right?
Maybe.
Sonny Moore. He had he was the iconic MySpace emo kid. Right?
Yeah, he kind of was.
That all the girls were like, oh, he's so hot, and memed him into existence.
Yeah.
They made tribute pages before tribute pages were existed, right? Like, you look at like Lil B or Soulja Boy or whatever, like, they were making multiple MySpace pages and capping them out in friends, and they were memeing themselves because no one else would do it.
Yeah, I guess this brings up interesting thoughts to me of like, it feels like we're in a new era, but we're still kind of in a transitional period. Like, because I think back to that time and being like, you were part of the younger wave of getting on MySpace and being online and listening
Pokemon's
to new
cards
things.
Came out when I was in grade 1 in my world.
Sure. Like, I'm just saying, like, but I was also, I'm a little bit older, right? And I was in the sort of, I got caught in looking backwards while you guys were looking forwards a little bit, right? Like, whereas, like, my friends and I were like, no, we don't want to be online because we're going to actual concerts and we're doing actual things or whatever, right? And we just had this sort of different mentality about it, right? So but my sort of thought here is like, well, was the 90s and 2000s the transition period to online, or are we just still in the transition period? It's just going to be this epically long transition period.
My transition
that's going to have multiple generations born and raised in different eras of transition.
I think it's for each person to decide, like, and look back, like, when did they finally have like direct access to the internet, right? Like, for me, that was 3rd or 4th grade, like direct access, almost 5 days out of 7 days a week, right? At least for an hour, right? Like that was huge,
Yeah.
right?
Well, for me, it was like late high school, but also it was dial-up, and it was like just chat rooms. Like it wasn't as interesting.
But see, that's
Right.
it wasn't interesting to you. But in my world, right? Like the person who curated, because there was no Google, you had to somehow find out about the website.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So my curated world was Cartoon Network, and the certain things, once you did them enough, right? And you only go back to the same games because it was games to us, right? And software and that sort of things. It starts loading faster because that's just the way the internet's built, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, cookies, cache, la 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 la. So my world, right? Rather than you're looking for information, my world was gamification.
Yeah, well, no, I just mean like when I started looking at the internet,
Yeah.
it didn't have the gamification components because it was still so low bandwidth. It was like chat rooms that would just crash, or like
But that's
if
just-
you wanted to look at a picture, you'd have to like start it downloading, then go make cereal and come back when the picture downloaded.
Well, I think though that was like just because that was all that existed, because it was like your My 5 on your phone, right? Remember what you could have like unlimited texting with 5
with
friends,
5 people, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like you only
yeah.
really knew 5 websites,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you don't have this plethora of ideas to go through
Yeah.
because there was no real like web page. Even though there's Ultra Vista and there's Yahoo,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
but they weren't, they weren't
yeah.
that to
And
a
they weren't-
kid.
Yeah, and it wasn't the same way where you could go there and quickly see if you liked it or not. You had
Yeah.
to be like pretty diligent about like, am I going to wait for this to load or
Totally.
whatever, right? So I think that's interesting. I think the idea of the My 5 is actually really interesting because I often bring this up with my students where I get them to think about their own internet behaviors and certainly their own web browsing behaviors and how like we think of this as internet and digital era as this sort of vast ocean of all the information that you could ever want, but then we also tend to stick to our own 5 website
It's like
neighborhoods, right?
54% of mobile use is through a social media app or something like that, or phone use or whatever it be,
yeah,
right? Like
and even
it's
then,
crazy.
like, do you go to like a bunch of like accounts that you've never heard of just to find new opinions, or do you check the same things that you normally check, right? Like that's the sort of pattern of usage that we tend to
Totally.
have of these things.
Because you start thinking of it like the Washington Post or like the newspaper in that regard, right? Like, and that's the way I view it, right? Like
flip
it's
to the sports section,
you know,
is that
or
what you mean?
magazine or whatever. But yeah, like I want to go flip through the sports section because that's going to be who you follow, right?
Mm-hmm.
My following tastes, can vary like crazy depending on the flavor and what I want to achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting how you can game that side of things too, right? You'd be like, okay, if you go to this subgenre too many times a little bit, it will start getting served up to you,
Yeah.
which is dangerous.
Do you ever do that where you're like let's say you're like doing a YouTube spiral and you
Yeah.
see something that you think's interesting? Every now and then I'll be like, do I want to screw up my recommendation algorithm by clicking on this? Like, and,
I use
and start
multiple
getting.
accounts actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean like I don't want people to know that I watched that video. I mean more like I just don't want YouTube to like start serving me that
Totally.
vein of stuff. Even though I'm interested in this thing, I'm worried that
I get that.
how it will skew my like just recommend things that I already want to see, right? Like you already know me, YouTube. Don't get too complicated.
I
right?
accept it, and I actually want to know where they want to take me, right?
Yeah.
So my thing with memes is actually it's less about the meme created, less about who shared it, and more the reaction of who comments on it, right?
Ooh, that's a very art kind of view, right? Like it's
it's-
about how it makes you feel and how
Totally.
you interpret it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
it's 100. I'm gonna throw something out there and yell into the void, and someone yells back. That's the more interesting piece, no matter what it is, right? So if YouTube wants to recommend, and they made some really
That's a
great
really interesting way
recommendations.
of thinking about things, though. Like that we in the past we viewed the creation to be the ultimate act, whereas now we view the reaction and the interaction to be the ultimate act.
Yeah. Like
kind of a really
let's look at
paradigm shift.
Early
right?
YouTube. A lot of creators built their YouTube creations off reactions to
Yeah.
YouTube videos, and that
Remember
doesn't
when the-
exist anymore. 'Cause
Yeah.
that used to sub, right? You could
Yeah.
literally win YouTube by being a reaction video
Yeah.
that was catchy.
There's
and
still
fast.
a huge genre of that, right?
It's different though.
But yeah,
because in the old day though, big creator, you could piggyback off big creator immediately.
Yeah.
So and people don't know this
Reactions to
because
the reactions.
yeah, reactions to the actual right. So and that it's just like being the Twitter reply guy.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like and that's just memes, and you do it enough, and if you're good enough,
Yeah.
away you go.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you remember when is it the Fine Brothers?
Yes, I love them.
And but would you?
No, I don't love them.
Remember when there was the big controversy that they like tried to patent the word reaction, like they tried to
Yes.
copyright.
I was mixing up
YouTube
Vlog Brothers
reactions?
with the Fine Brothers.
Yeah.
The Vlog Brothers are amazing individuals, and I
Okay.
highly recommend them.
Yeah.
But the Fine Brothers, very interesting. They wanted to take the idea of reaction videos and the idea of showing content
And
to
reacting
someone
to it,
else
yeah.
and showing people's faces.
And
No
own
different
that.
than like Jimmy Kimmel on the street. Hey, I'm going to say something and watch someone react to it.
But isn't that the microcosm of essentially capitalism? Where those guys created a channel that they thought was going to be interesting. They wanted to be creators and sort of enjoy the process of doing this. But then it started making them so much money that they're like, no, we need to control this and we need to take power over this. And
I get what they were trying to do. They did it in the very wrong way, and I don't want to like make them good guys, but if we want to take in the world of like YouTube has too much power, they were actually trying to create their own like sub brands where people could submit their reactions and then kind of create their own feeder system, their own draft pool, right? No different than any of those like meme video
so maybe,
pages.
Again, maybe it got lost in the communication.
It got
'Cause
lost in the
I remember the
communication.
component of them wanting a copyright.
They did
and
try
then them
that
having
part
to
too.
like do the like mea culpa video of like we're so sorry.
Yeah,
people.
they
because
tried to
their own
backpedal
community
on
sort of
that.
came for them, right? Like came,
Totally.
came
It was
after
funny
them,
as hell.
right? Yeah.
It was great. But like, they totally tried to do that. But they tried to spin it in this way, but they weren't wrong in their concept. It was wrong in their execution and actually, making a business that cares, that is sustainable, right? Because whatever.
Sure.
Sure. I believe that it's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm always so confused, or not confused, but I'm always curious and unsure about like what do the revenues really look like for some of these channels that have this incredible level of popularity, and in particular, this was sparked by the recent return of epic rap battles of history.
Or you could look at like the demise of SourceFed and the rebrand of whatever the hell their creators are doing, which comes out of
Or even like Smosh.
anything Philip DeFranco, anything Smosh,
Yeah.
anything.
Well, Phil
Ryan,
DeFranco actually he left a network.
He's been through a few, and
He's been through a
he's
few,
independent,
and he's gone independent because he was just like, this is the way for me to.
Yeah.
Right. But I also think that it was interesting because I think I saw him say one time that basically his main revenue streams are merchandise.
Yeah, and it's been
Right?
for a long way because
Yeah.
you always get
Well, just
demonetized.
because I was so sort of curious about this because I view epic rap battles of history as being like one of these like it's so popular, it's so influential in terms of what they did. But then when they came back this year, they came back with like a real focus on their Patreon account.
Yeah.
Right? Like really trying to which was a new introduction, and it was like they wanted to drive traffic there, they wanted to drive donations there, and I was just like, how did you not monetize this enough?
See,
But maybe that's because YouTube didn't allow them to, I guess. Like, is that what's going on there, right?
I don't know, like,
Because then I look at other things, like with these video game creators
but now you're
who
valuing.
are totally crushing it revenue-wise.
But
right?
you're now well, that's okay. So that's you're valuing now the epic rap battles for their content archive, not the content that they stopped making for when they disappeared. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, so you mean I'm like giving their past more value than their present?
Yeah, you know what I
Ah,
mean,
okay.
right? So
Yeah.
like if you stop going to local meetings, right, and all of a sudden your business starts drying up because you stop going to those meetings, right, and you got a lot of clients from those meetings, that's on you, not right. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so like you stopped making videos and you missed this like the boom times of YouTube.
Yeah,
in some
right.
ways.
Like you thought the only way of doing YouTube was you get attention and then you move it and you go to TV, right? And you tried that, or like you were wrong in your execution, right? And that's where the free market matters, right? Not the fact that they're talented and they have a back
YouTube's
market.
not a free market.
It's not a free market, but attention is part of a free market because if you aren't producing to capture the attention, that's on you, right? Like I will go and like
But
my
isn't-
podcast. I probably have fucked myself on my podcast the amount of times I just disappeared for a while.
Yeah.
Right. And I've always maintained my commitments to the people who have financially given me money, which isn't huge, but it's still a financial commitment all the same. I make sure I stay above board on that if it happens.
You want to
But-
insert the ad right here? Or?
No. But no. Like it's just like I have a Patreon that makes me like $9 a month
was a
or
joke.
American.
Right.
But I do get
Also go to
advertisers.
Casper.com.
Oh, ouch. Ouch.
Sorry, man.
That's American at
you
least.
can edit that out.
No, I won't. That's American. It doesn't matter. But like,
I should have said go to stamps.com or like something less personal.
see, that's very interesting to me, right? Is like there actually is this whole like there's these three guys who are working to capture the Canadian podcasting advertising market and funneling it through their traditional routes to the American
create a
world.
rival agency?
Oh, there's probably multiple agencies. Like I own the idea of podcastcanada.ca or Podcast Canada in theory is my IP, but can you really own that IP? I don't know. Do I have enough content out there to make a case? Probably, but it's
Well, yeah. I mean, you really got to have to think of that as a service. I think of like as the traditional agency role of connecting advertisers to relevant media.
But
right?
well, their whole thing is like there's this whole like ad insertion. So like right now, the current world of podcasting, right, is the ad is there and it's there. You know what I mean? Now there's the digital insertion of ads and like the rotation of it and the possibilities of that.
So like I listen to Really? I hadn't heard about this. Like this idea that I could listen to a podcast from 2 years ago, but it'll have a current ad.
Yeah,
inserted?
so we're moving towards that.
That's dangerous.
And we're moving towards like iTunes.
Because I always found
you can search the podcast audio through text through the next level iTunes, which will be a desktop app. So they created an industry. Now they're trying to take it back.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
and so
they
like
really are trying to
like
power.
RSS is what it's built off of. So they built it off an open platform. Right, so I wish they probably wish they controlled it
They're
a little bit
now
more.
Rebuild it on their closed platform, or
I don't know what they're going to do, but
Yeah.
you know, you got Spotify buying Gimlet Media and Spotify owning DistroKid and like iTunes shutting down is shutting down iTunes or Apple. Yeah, iTunes is gone.
No. They're splitting it.
I don't know. Something's dying.
No. So I was reading about this because they just announced this, where it's basically like they're splitting up the iTunes store
Yeah.
and into different things, where basically it became too unwieldy to be one thing. So now they'll have a podcasting app,
Yes.
a music app, and a TV app, and they'll all sort of be tied to the same store.
Yes. Because it's a little slow sometimes to download your podcast if you go through iTunes, and I don't, right? But they want you to use iTunes because iTunes,
Yeah.
Apple Home,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
It'll be interesting. I'm actually interested because, like, honestly, like, I mean, I keep using Apple products because they're more secure, supposedly, and they're just more simple.
Yeah.
And podcasting was a huge part of that. Like, where I was like, I use podcasts all the time on my long drives, and
I had a Zune for podcasts.
Did you?
Yeah.
Holy crap!
Fuck, you want to talk emo, kid? I had a Zune, bitch.
No. Oh, I definitely had a like $700 iPod when it came out. Right? Like that's definitely, and it was the most amazing thing ever.
Remember
because I
those
was
days?
the kid who had CD books, like those like 50 CD binder things. I would carry those around all the time. Like I traveled backpacking with a Discman and a huge book of CDs.
You know, if I was smart back in the day, I would have found a friend who bought an iPod when they first came out, got the box from them, sold it to myself from a fake account on eBay, and manufactured attention that I got scammed. Like that's how easy
You're
it would
retro scamming yourself now?
But just think of like back then, right, where the internet was such a scary place, where like eBay is, you know, a scary blah 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 blah, right? Like eBay in a world right now is like, in my opinion, they've kind of lost some footing, right? At least in Canada, right?
Yeah.
But they've also they're getting some footing back because you got Gary Vaynerchuk and all these other people, right? Like who are showing your people making, you know, buying something for $1 and selling it for $100, right? Like so there's also this rise, but there's all these other markets of like Facebook Marketplace and like the cash society, and moving towards a cashless society is a very, very interesting conversation. And luckily we still have batteries.
I think the most interesting thing I've seen on that recently was, of course, the huge announcement of Instagram putting in purchasing interface distribution.
Or Facebook coin coming down the road.
Well, sure, but no, I mean, like I'm sure you saw this, where Instagram had like the 20 big brands that they were going to start. They were adding a buy now button.
I think I started seeing that, but like I don't spend
like,
as much time on Instagram.
We
as people
can't
think.
do it in Canada. They're it's a pilot
okay.
project in America only. But no, there were just huge announcements about it, and it was like, of course, I brought it into the classroom a bunch of times because I'm like, this is a total game changer for distribution.
They're picking the brands that they work with. So
yeah, so basically they sort of picked 20 brands, I think it was, that were like logical fits.
this is an interesting like
This
curation
pilot
world,
project,
right?
Well, it was an element of curation, an element of companies that are large enough to sort of invest in this. Like, some of them were smaller direct to consumer, and some of them were also like Nike and Adidas, right? Like this idea that the hype beasts could see the shoes and click automatically and buy, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I was trying to think of it as a way of like, how could this be relevant for tourism, right? And it's sort of tough
to book your canoe trip
it's
immediately from a Banff photo sort of shit.
Something like that, right? Like I feel like that could happen, but also like tourism trips tend to be these larger, more complicated purchases that take advanced planning, whereas this was a lot of instant purchase was really the goal.
But if you look at the Fire Festival, right, and apply a Fire Festival perspective to Instagram, there's some kids with some crazy amount of money that don't give a fuck.
In the discussions that we were having, there was like, it certainly was relevant for events where like if this band announces that they're coming, you instant click and then you can go. But it would be more difficult to buy like a trip because the date selection and the flight selection would fuck up the interface, right?
Unless it has the back end to your calendar, right?
Well, sure, but like most of the time when you're sort of planning vacations, you try and plan them a combination of when you have available time and when price matches availability of your time, right?
But what if you're on Facebook and Facebook Work and Instagram and it's now
and you've got it plugged into the back of your head
and you got it plugged in and WhatsApp
we actually thought that ultimately there was a ton of potential for this to be if you tied it to location. So like when you are traveling, they can serve you ads that are location based, and you can be like, well, that looks amazing. I want the tour tomorrow, or I want it this afternoon, and buy it that way, right? Or even do it more micro, where like this is within 1 kilometer of you. Would you like to go to one of these places now?
Yeah. So it sees that you're looking up burger joints, and then you flip to Instagram, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, a burger? I can tap it, and boom, it's like, okay, I walk down 5 minutes, it's already ready to go and paid
something
for.
Like that,
that's
that kind of element, right? Like there could be that, or like just learning about destinations and things like that, right? Because like to me, I was like,
it's Pokemon Go, man.
What's that?
It's like Pokemon Go, right? Like.
Right.
It goes back to what I fucking wrote my grad sem about, right? The gamification of destination
and destinations
and how I think we call it a
honestly
mobile world. No, that's just our world at this point, right? That's
the interface.
It's the interface. It's the remote control.
Yeah. But we'll see. I mean, who knows what the interface? I don't know. I still think the mobile device is going to end up being the interface for a little bit longer, like because even 3 years ago we had this whole virtual reality is coming, but it's like not quite right. That was like the 4th time virtual reality was announced.
We're still figuring out watches.
Watches, right? Like
wearables.
The one product that Apple won't release sales figures on still, right?
Wearables need to get fixed,
right? I think I'd be a big believer in I'm curious to see what comes out with the second generation of the Microsoft HoloLens. Like I think that's sort of. To me, it's like VR is eventually going to be great, but it's going to take so much computing power.
That's where I think this whole cartoon world, this whole idea of cartoonizing yourself, like you look at the Bitmoji low-key, like you say VR, I think cartoon, right? Like the whole, are you familiar with the Sonic the Hedgehog Knuckles meme, right? And there's this whole like extremely racist meme of basically those who have the computer power to VR took Knuckles and kept on saying, "Where's my spaghetti?" And there's this weird racist undertone to it all. But like VR is not at that point, and the people who are taking it, they're taking a cartoon of sorts, right? So but the Bitmoji was on the right track. They just didn't figure out the monetization of it or whatever it be. The idea that people need something to put in place of themselves, where when they can't take a photo of themselves, they need to project themselves. Right, that's all a cartoon is, right? So, like the cartoonization of it all is the nostalgic part too, right?
Well, it's also like there's a nostalgia component and also a familiarity of we create avatars for ourselves online. Can we create one that's like an actual cartoonish representation of yourself that makes sense? Like I find that really interesting. And actually, Microsoft bought what's the name of it? It was like one of these really fantastic. Like meeting technologies.
Yep, like Cisco or something.
Well, not Cisco, but it was like an up and coming software where basically like the impression is that they're going to integrate into the HoloLens virtual meetings, right? Like that's going to be one of the main functions of the HoloLens for things beyond, we need a 3D model of the human body or of this engineering piece or of this machine, right? And I think that's really going to be an interesting component because I think AR in tourism is just like you and Katie were, 10 years ahead of the time, but that's still an idea that could fly, but it's going to take interestingly enough, tourism is an industry that slowly adapts to technology, even though sometimes those technologies get forced through them.
See, that's where I think your version of tourism still has to do with actual physical visitation, where I almost view tourism actually 100% through my phone, right? So right now I'm going through old photos and videos of whale watching on Vancouver Island and recreating content that in my world is I can take myself back to a vacation time of a different person who I was through the content, right? Yeah. It's now accessible for me to edit, share, create, where before it was super hard to cut up a VHS or cut a DVD or whatever it be, right? So vacation, right? What is a vacation now for some people? It's nothing but a photo on an Instagram, right? So I can create not maybe a vacation, but I can create a story, and I'm using the cartoon of maybe an elephant because I want to have some fun and make some content to show my daughter, some fun level,
sure,
right?
But
so,
I think you. Yeah, I mean, you
I'm
eventually
blending what you consider
tourism
tourism
have to put guardrails on things, right? So you're talking about the sort of the life cycle of a tourism experience that lasts far longer than when you consume it. It lasts your lifetime essentially, right?
Yeah.
And how the digital components have added layers to that, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to still go and have that experience the first time. But you're right, I am narrowly viewing.
Once you document it, and once we have my glasses are replaced with some sort of wearable, right, and I can revisit it through VR, right?
Yeah.
And I can chop it up into a 5-minute highlight reel where people are walking next to me, through the city streets, right? And with the exception of maybe eating, which isn't at that level yet, right? They can literally go and be okay, let's go raft guiding now. And be holy shit, they're joining me on something I've already bought and paid for. That's literally the level that it's going to be at.
But like you said, with the Epic Raft Battles of History, am I going to want to buy the raft guiding from the past, or am I going to want to buy the raft guiding from now?
But I think...
And it's an interesting question, because I think in a lot of ways destinations might be better able to sell their past version before climate change or over tourism, right? And
For sure.
we also have this tendency to want, now.
But if I could get my only high adventure rafting trip I ever guided as a raft guide was the day after a ridiculous party where I woke up and shat myself and then proceeded to be really hungover and take my mom and my dad down, my first thing, and I fucking nailed everything.
Nice.
Do I want to see myself and revisit that? Hell yeah, man.
Yes.
And that's funny as fuck. And that has huge value because that's nostalgic, right? But then if I want to flip through an archive of being oh, remember, I wish I was on that one. Mm-hmm. I'll pay $20 and pull that one up. Now it's a video game.
Yeah, sure. But I think that spending trends would indicate that, yes, people are taking Instagram views towards their vacations, but they're also buying more vacations than they ever were. They're also valuing it higher up the level of their budget priorities. So even though we live in this digitized age, and we still are just craving not only new experiences in new places, but also just the social interaction that tends to be more prevalent when you're in a place that's unfamiliar.
I think that's where VR, it will be so integrated you won't know the difference, and that's.
But are you going to get that from VR? I think that these are parts of these questions, right?
I think we'll see it in my lifetime, for sure.
I mean, maybe, right?
I think it's.
But you're also going to Does that mean that you're not going to want to go to Florence at some point in your life? That you're not going to want to...
Oh, absolutely not. Right? I think that brings back the level of exclusivity, right? Because pretty soon, right, once it's digital, it scales at scale, right? That trip that maybe I want to pay $20 for first time, second time, I'd be 50 cents now, right? You know what? It gives the value, it flips the value a little bit too, right? To if someone doesn't want to throw a quarter at it, right? And they very well should throw a quarter at it and just try it, right? If that quarter is worth more to that company than not getting the quarter because they're overpricing themselves, I think you'll start viewing it hey, it's just so cheap at this point too, right? It's going to be cheaper than a vending machine literally getting a soda.
Yeah. Well, then Are we talking about like a brief period where that's virtual reality, and then the next stage is we're into Total Recall and we're buying memories, and they're far more vivid than a virtual version of them would have been, or and
I
that.
don't know. I think we're at the point where like we're gonna see things change so much, and we got to get going. But
I just wonder how long you want to record for.
I don't know. I got like 2 bars, and these aren't even fresh batteries, so I'm surprised. I've never actually recorded this long.
We've been talking for a while.
Yeah. Do you want to wrap it up? We can wrap it.
Sure. I mean,
yeah. I got to finish some stuff and actually maybe do some chores. I should do that. All
Okay.
right. Cheers. Well, thanks for meeting
Nevin.
with me.
Oh man, this was fun.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. If you're new, consider subscribing. Yeah, I do have a Patreon if you want to check it out, but it's not things special. I don't really care if fuck. Use hashtag community. Shout out to Marlene Hibbs, whose bike was stolen, and she's trying to rebuild somehow in Edmonton to continue her ride across Canada for mental health and all that stuff. So trying to support her. And other than that, be sure to check out more. I'm going to be trying to do more low-key chats like this where I just do them rather than like booking, because fuck booking and scheduling, all that shit.
Well, yeah, this was a surprise.
Yeah. All right. Cheers.